Hello guys, welcome back to the D&N Medical Series. I'm your boy Damar here with a brand new tutorial video. Now in this video we're going to focus our attention on humoral immunity. Now in the last video we looked on innate immunity and adaptive immunity. Now this is a form of adaptive immunity because of course it includes your B cells and your T cells in some cases. Now when we talk about humoral immunity, it's predominantly the B cells that are involved, and the B cells, they produce antibodies, right? And these antibodies, they are made up of glycoprotein and Ig, which is immunoglobulins. All right, so it's a complex of glycoprotein and immunoglobulins. Now these antibodies, they can recognize specific antigen, and these antigens are made up of polysaccharides and glycolipids. All right, so the T cells, they may be involved or they may not be involved in the process. So now let's begin with the steps for the humoral response. So the first step is the entrance, of course, of your antigen into the body. Now, let's say, for example, someone has a knife, right? And the knife is like a rusty knife. It has a lot of rust and it's contaminated with a lot of pathogens, right? And then it breaks your mechanical barrier, which is your skin, and it enters your body. Now, once it enters your body, it is transported basically. All right, so in the first immune response, remember that we've learned about the neutrophils and your macrophage cells, which are basically your first line of defense. They are basically at the gate of what I was describing as the castle, right? So these neutrophils and macrophage, they are there just ready and waiting for these foreign antigens to present themselves. So in the humoral response, the antigen is recognized by the B cells, right? And the B cells is at different places in the body. It could be in your spleen, in your tissues, your lymph node, etc. So what happens next is that these antigen, they are engulfed by macrophages and B cells. Well, mostly macrophages. So it's like, you ever see movies where they're trying to trap someone and they go up in the net and stuff like that. It's like that. So the macrophage engulf them. It will be like the net, right? And then they get the organisms inside. Now, while they are inside, they are being processed. While they are being processed, some macrophage, remember, they are also involved in phagocytosis, so they can engulf the pathogen, and if they can digest them, they will digest these pathogens. So now that these pathogens are engulfed and they're in the macrophages and the B cells, right, as we said before, it is in the processing state. So these antigens, they have to be processed because each antigen is specific and they need to be recognized so you know what kind of response to mount. So within these antigen processing cells, there is a complex that is called major histocompatibility complex, or MHC, and there are different types of MHC. You have type 1, which is found in nucleated cells, and then you have type 2, which is found on your macrophages, your B cells, and your T cells. So these MHC complex, they are involved in presentation of antigens. So after these antigens are processed in your B cells and your macrophage, the MCH2 complex now brings the processed antigen to the surface for recognition. Now, what recognizes these cells in the T-dependent humoral response is your T helper cells. So your T helper cells will recognize them, and this will cause activation of these cells and proliferation, and it usually involves your cytokines. So examples of these cytokines include your interleukins. So for T helper cells, is usually interleukin 2 to 6. So 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And also your gamma interferons, right? So these are all produced by the T cells. So we're just going to wrap up with the final step or stage in the humoral response. So the B cells, as we said, this is the major cell in this type of response. So the B cells now is mature, and it matures into a plasma cell, right, or a memory cell, right? So it can be of two types, right? So plasma cells, these are the cells that will produce your antibodies, right? And then the memory cells is for memory, as the name suggests. So usually if you're exposed to a pathogen before, the body will remember it, right? And if there should be a second infection, then your body will mount a response quicker. So it's a much more efficient process. And memory cells, they are very important for your secondary response. An example of its use is in immunization. So in immunization, you get like a live or dead form of the pathogen injected in your body. And what happens is that during the process, your body will have memory of this infection or pathogen, so that if it should occur, it will have all the tools to attack it before it reaches the stage of giving those symptoms, right? So a primary response is 5 to 10 days, secondary response 1 to 3 days. So as you can see, the secondary response is basically half the time of the primary response, right? So it's very efficient. Now the last thing that we're going to look on is our T-independent humoral response. So remember, it can include your T helper cell, which is majority of the time, or it can be T independent. Now the difference is that in the T independent, only IgM is activated, and IgM is basically for primary infection. Now after a primary infection, your body will produce IgG, which will help in a secondary response. All right, so Ig2 is produced for the T independent, and this does not follow the classic complement pathway. So what will happen is that there will be no memory cells, and therefore in a secondary response, it will take the same time as a primary. All right, so that's it for humoral response. See you in the next video.